stop taking life seriously, Alan Watts explains why it's all an act. Have you ever felt like life is one giant performance? Like you're on a stage, acting out a role you never fully agreed to play, surrounded by others who are also pretending, but no one will admit it? That's not a glitch in the Matrix. That is the Matrix. Alan Watts once said, "The real you is not a puppet which life pushes around. The real, deep down you is the whole universe." And that statement isn't just spiritual poetry. It's a direct shot at the illusion we're all trapped in. We take life so seriously. Our careers, our status, our identities, our future. As if any of it were permanent, as if any of it could be held onto. But Watts invites us to see the great cosmic joke. Life is a game, a play, a drama. And the more seriously we take our role, the further we drift from the truth of who we really are. Think about it. From the moment we're born, we're taught to be someone. Be successful, be responsible, be respectable. But Alan Watts flips this entire narrative on its head. He says, what if the purpose of life is not to become something, but to realize that you already are everything? And the seriousness, the grind, the anxiety, the constant tension we live with is because we think the play is real. We think we are the role. But the actor is not the role he plays. You can play a king or a beggar on stage, but you're still the same actor underneath. So the real question is, who are you when you stop performing?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This isn't just philosophical fluff, it has massive implications for how we live day to day. If you truly internalize that life is a play, then you stop needing to win every argument. You stop needing to impress everyone. You stop needing to control outcomes. You can laugh at the absurdity. You can play your part, but with a light touch. Watts wasn't telling people to be nihilistic. He wasn't saying nothing matters. He was saying everything matters infinitely less than we think it does. And that's what sets us free. When you stop clinging to the illusion of control, you begin to dance with life rather than wrestle it. But here's the twist. Most people are addicted to seriousness. Why? Because seriousness gives us the illusion of importance. If I'm stressed, busy, overwhelmed, it must mean I'm doing something meaningful, right? But Watts cut through that delusion. He says seriousness is just ego in disguise. It's the ego trying to make itself feel real, feel significant in a universe that is ultimately playful, mysterious, and uncontrollable. What if the very thing we think gives life substance, seriousness, is actually what makes it unbearable? Let's get brutally honest. How much of your suffering comes from taking things too seriously? How often do you stress over things that, in the grand scheme of existence, mean absolutely nothing? That awkward conversation, that missed opportunity, that social media post that didn't get enough likes. Watts would smile and say, "You were never here to be a success or a brand or a concept. You were here to experience the play, to enjoy the dance. And when you forget that, life becomes a prison." So ask yourself, what would happen if I treated life more like a game and less like a test? What would happen if I stopped performing and started playing? And let's be clear, this isn't about being reckless or irresponsible. It's about perspective. It's about realizing that the point of the game is to play, not to win. That's what children understand instinctively. And what adults forget, children create entire worlds out of nothing. They become pirates, dragons, space explorers. No script, no purpose, just play. And then we call it growing up when we teach them to suppress that spontaneity in favor of mortgages, career ladders, and social image management. But Watts would argue that real maturity is regaining that childlike playfulness with awareness. It's knowing you're in a game, but playing it beautifully anyway. When you stop taking life so seriously, something incredible begins to happen. You become lighter, freer, funnier. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop needing to be anyone other than who you are in this moment. And paradoxically, that's when people start paying attention. That's when your energy becomes magnetic. Because most people are still trapped in the heaviness, still caught in the act. And when they meet someone who's not, someone who's laughing at the absurdity and flowing with the chaos, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's a reminder that there's another way to exist. So before we go any deeper, take a second and ask yourself, what am I taking too seriously right now? What if I could just drop that weight? Not later, but now. That job title, that relationship tension, that self. What if the most powerful thing you could do today is to take one step back and laugh? The cosmic joke, why reality is funniest when you stop controlling it. We spend so much time treating the universe like a business deal. We want guarantees, we want insurance, we want control, but life doesn't work that way, and it never has. The more we try to lock it down, the more absurd it becomes, and that's where the cosmic joke kicks in. The punchline is that we're all pretending to know what we're doing, yet none of us actually do. We're born into a vast, incomprehensible mystery, spinning on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And we act like we're in charge, like we can actually figure it all out. Alan Watts would sit back, grin, and say, "Isn't it obvious? The whole thing is a play, and the only ones suffering are the ones who think it's real." He didn't mean this to belittle pain or invalidate real struggles, quite the opposite. He was pointing to the underlying absurdity of pretending we can avoid chaos, pain, or uncertainty by taking things more seriously, as if seriousness would somehow shield us from the winds of change. But life is change. It's fluid, unpredictable, and wild. And the more we try to impose structure and permanence on it, the more we suffer. What if the very act of trying to control life is what makes it unbearable? What if the universe is simply inviting us to let go, to stop clenching, stop resisting, and start laughing? It's not about apathy. It's not about giving up. It's about surrendering the illusion that we ever had control to begin with. Watts loved to compare life to music. The point of music isn't to get to the end, he'd say. If that were the case, the best composers would write holy finales. The point is to play, to dance through the notes, to feel the rhythm, to enjoy the flow. And yet, we treat life like a checklist, a sequence of achievements, a ladder to climb. But ladders don't dance. Music does. And if you're not dancing, you're missing the point. So ask yourself, am I dancing with life, or am I trying to choreograph every step? Am I flowing, or am I resisting? Am I laughing at the absurdity, or am I still trying to make it all make sense? Watts would argue that true wisdom comes when you stop trying to outsmart the universe and start trusting it instead. Trusting not that it will give you what you want, but that it knows what it's doing, even when you don't. That's the real leap of faith, not in a deity or a doctrine, but in the process itself. And here's the beautiful twist. When you finally stop trying to control everything, you don't become passive, you become alive. You become spontaneous, creative, responsive. You become less like a machine and more like a river. And suddenly laughter returns. Not force, not cynical, but the deep belly-shaking laughter that comes from seeing the absurdity of it all. The randomness, the unpredictability, the weirdness of being human. You laugh. Not because life is easy, but because you finally see that it was never supposed to be anything else. It was never about getting it right, it was about experiencing it, whatever it turns out to be. So what if your seriousness is costing you joy? What if your need to control is blocking the very flow that would carry you forward with less effort, more grace, and far more laughter? The cosmic joke isn't cruel, it's liberating, because once you realize that everyone is improvising, you stop needing to pretend you've got it all figured out. You can be real, you can be weird, you can be free. The freedom of not knowing. Embracing chaos as your greatest ally. In a world obsessed with certainty, information and answers, the most radical act you can commit is to say, I don't know. Not out of ignorance, but out of awareness. Alan Watts understood something most of us spend our whole lives running from, that not knowing is not a flaw, it's a feature. It's the doorway to freedom, because the moment we admit we don't have it all figured out, we stop pretending. We stop clinging to artificial structures, fake identities, and rigid plans that give us the illusion of control. Chaos, uncertainty, unpredictability, change is not the enemy. It's the very essence of life. And when we stop fighting it, we start living in harmony with the universe instead of in opposition to it. But here's the problem. We've been conditioned to fear the unknown. From a young age, we're taught that knowledge equals power, that certainty is safety, and that chaos is something to be eliminated. But Watts would gently laugh at that. He'd remind us that everything we truly love in life, love itself, creativity, mystery, spontaneity, emerges from the unknown. Think about it. Every great moment in your life started with uncertainty. You didn't know how it would turn out, you didn't have a script, and yet those are the moments that changed you. So why do we try so hard to eliminate the very thing that makes life alive? The truth is, we try to kill chaos because we're afraid of what it might reveal, not about the world, about ourselves. Because when the structures fall away, when the plans break down, when the future is unclear, we're left with only one question: who am I, really? And that's terrifying. It's easier to hide behind schedules and roles and routines than it is to face the rawness of our own being. But Watts would argue that facing that rawness is the beginning of real freedom. Because only when you stop trying to hold the universe in a box can you finally experience its vastness. Let's be honest, how many of our anxieties come from trying to force life into a straight line? How much pressure do we put on ourselves to have a 5-year plan, a clear identity, a perfect trajectory? But what if the greatest growth comes when we diverge from the path? What if the detours, the breakdowns, the unexpected twists are not mistakes, but invitations? Invitations to surrender, to trust, to explore a part of ourselves we never would have known if everything had gone according to plan. Watts described the unknown as a playground, not a prison. He saw chaos not as a threat, but as a friend wearing a mask. And once you stop resisting it, once you lean into the swirling mess of life, you begin to see the patterns emerge. Not patterns you control, but patterns that emerge from your participation. You become part of the dance, not the choreographer. And something profound happens. You relax. Not because life becomes predictable, but because you no longer need it to be. You start to see that the freedom of not knowing is not emptiness, it's openness, it's space for new things to arise, new ideas, new versions of yourself, new ways of being in the world. So here's the question. What are you still trying to control that no longer serves you? What belief, identity, or plan are you holding on to out of fear of the unknown? And deeper still, what would happen if you let it go? Not recklessly, not as an escape, but as a conscious act of trust. Trust in the intelligence of life. Trust in your own resilience. Trust that you can meet whatever arises, not because you have all the answers, but because you're finally willing to dance with the questions. When we embrace not knowing, we discover something extraordinary, a kind of lightness, a kind of agility, a kind of joy that can't exist when we're burdened by the need for certainty. We stop being rigid and start being responsive. We stop fearing change and start collaborating with it. And in that surrender, we don't become passive, we become powerful. Because true power isn't about control, it's about alignment. Alignment with reality as it is, not as we wish it to be. So the next time life throws you into chaos, don't panic, smile, recognize the invitation, step into the unknown like a dancer stepping onto a stage with no choreography, no script, just presence. That's where the magic is. That's where you are. The joy of the play, why you were never meant to be anything but alive. If there's one truth that Alan Watts tried to whisper into the ears of the anxious, the ambitious, the over-serious, it's this: you were never meant to become something. You were only ever meant to be. Not a title, not a role, not a brand, just alive. Fully, joyfully, inexplicably alive. The tragedy of modern life is that we've traded this raw aliveness for a concept of success. We become obsessed with identity, who we are, what we do, how we're seen. But Watts would say, you're not a thing, you're a process, you're a happening. And that's why taking life too seriously is such a cosmic mistake. Because the moment you fix yourself into a rigid idea of who you are or what life should be, you stop playing, you stop being. And that's where suffering begins. Think about it. Children know how to play. They don't ask, am I playing well enough? Or what's the ROI of this game? They play because it's what feels most natural. They make up stories, become heroes, laugh at nonsense, and then move on. No attachment, no seriousness, just presence. And somewhere along the way we teach them to trade that in for the real world. But Watts would argue that the real world is the play, this moment, this breath, this experience. The serious world we're trained into, that's the illusion, that's the costume party where everyone forgets it's a party. So what does it mean to return to the play? It means letting go of the need to be impressive, letting go of the fear of looking foolish. It means doing things for the joy of the doing, not the outcome. Laughing when it doesn't make sense, dancing when no one's watching, or when everyone is. It means realizing that you don't need to earn your right to be here, you are here. That's enough. That's everything. Watts didn't want us to escape life or transcend it. He wanted us to dive into it joyfully, playfully, consciously, to say yes to the chaos, the beauty, the absurdity. Because when you stop taking life so seriously, you finally make space for joy. Not the kind you chase, but the kind that finds you. The kind that bubbles up from somewhere deeper than thought. The kind that reminds you, you're not broken, you're not behind, you're not failing, you're just in it. You're dancing. So here's the final question. What if nothing's wrong with you? What if there's nothing to fix, no final version of yourself to become? What if the only thing missing is your willingness to laugh, right now, right here, at the wonderful absurdity of it all? When you laugh, you remember. When you remember, you return. And when you return, you realize you've been free the whole time. The curtain was never real. The act was never required. You were never meant to be anything but alive. And now, maybe for the first time, you are.